Today's tutorial is on calculating interest. I've given you the four definitions, four vocabulary terms you need to know. So pause the video and copy down these notes. Okay, so the interest rate is the amount of interest as a percentage relative to the amount borrowed or invested. The principal is the original amount of money invested or borrowed. For example, if you borrow $100,000 to buy a car, or you put $20,000 in the bank, that would be your principal. Simple interest is interest earned over a period of time on the principal only. And it's not really realistic anymore, but it's still used sometimes. But compound interest is the one that's usually used the most. Compound interest is the interest earned over a period of time on the principal and the subsequent interest. It's like interest on interest. Think of a snowball rolling, and every time the snowball makes a revolution, it picks up more snow, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So we can pause the video again and copy down these names for the letters in these two formulas. And one of the big ideas of this unit is being able to figure out interest owed. Okay, so in our simple interest formula, the I represents interest in dollars. The P represents the principal, the money, in dollars. R is the interest rate, but it's the interest rate as a decimal. So when we do a calculation, I'll remind you how to change a percent to a decimal. And finally, T is time in years. So this is a really easy formula to use, and we're going to use our calculator, and it's going to be very straightforward. Compound interest looks a lot more tricky, but it's not really, because again, we're just going to use our calculator. So A represents the finish amount. It's not actually the interest, but we're going to have a really simple way of determining the interest. P again is the principal in dollars. R again is the interest rate as a decimal. N is the number of times interest is compounded in a year. And usually interest is either calculated or compounded monthly, weekly, or even daily. And again, T is time in years. So we have to make sure when we plug things into this formula, we're using the right numbers. So I don't want to go through all of this, but I just want you to see the difference between simple and compound interest. So our first calculation would be like this. How much interest would I make if I put my money away for 1 year? And we're going to make it really simple. We're always going to have the principal at 100, and we're always going to have our interest rate at 10%. Now, just that reminder, in order to go from percent to a decimal, what we simply do is move the decimal place 2 places to the right. So we're dividing by 100. So you can either plug that into your calculator, divide by 100, or just bounce the decimal place over. So in this example right here, if we looked at in year number 1, we put $100, say, in the bank, and the bank gives us 10%, and 10% of 100 is 10. So here's our interest rate calculation, and that's why we need a decimal. And finally, the total amount, we'll call it A, the total amount is equal to the principal plus any interest. So if we kept our money in the bank for 1 year, we would have $110. We make $10 interest. If we're going to do it for another year, well, again, here's the idea with simple interest. You don't roll the whole thing into the principal. The principal is always the same. And in 2 years, well, we'd have $100. We'd have the exact same calculation. We'd make, again, 10% interest, but now we'd have $120 because now we have the 100 plus the last year's $10 interest and this year's $10 interest. So I'm going to fill in the table because it's boring. Our principal is always going to be 100. We're always going to have an interest rate of 10%, and we're always going to make $10 a year. And when you put all those numbers in, then here's the money. So if you put $100 away for 4 years, you'd have 140 for 5 years, etc. So again, what I want you to notice is that it's always plus 10. Again, really simple. It's always the same. Okay, compound interest is a little bit different. Remember, compound interest is the interest on the interest as well as the principal. So here's what I want you to notice. I want you to notice that the money from the end of year one, the total, gets rolled into the start of the year. So this is this idea of compounding. Compounding just means making bigger. And again, what's going to happen is our interest rate is going to stay the same, but all of these other columns, the principal, the interest earned, and obviously the total amount, that's going to change every single year. So I'm going to do a sample calculation, and then I'm just going to write the totals because all the calculations are repetitive. So again, what's going to happen is, in this one right here, this is going to be our money we're going to start off with in the new year. And in order to calculate the interest, we're going to calculate 121 times the interest rate, which is 0.10, and that is 12.10. And then we're going to add those two things together, and we're going to get that. So 121 plus 12.1 equals 133.10. And what would again happen, I'm not going to do this calculation, we would put that over there, it would roll into our bank account, think January the 1st, and we do this calculation, again, $133.10 now, times 10%, etc., etc. So I'm going to fill in all of these, and fill them in with me as we go. And finally, we're going to finish off with $259.37. So here's what I want you to notice. You start off with the same amount of money, $100. You get the same interest rate, 10%. But after 10 years, using our simple interest notion, you end up with $200, whereas when you're compounding, you end up with $259.37. Now, there's a difference there, $59.37, and you might go, well, that's no big deal. But imagine instead of $100, you invested $1 million, or $100,000, or $10,000. That makes a big difference. So again, what kind of interest would you want? Well, you want compound. And again, you make more money. Now here's the bad news for you. Banks use compound interest to figure out how much money you owe. Credit card, mortgage, they compound, and it takes longer to pay off. And we're going to do a project like that. Okay, let's do some quick calculations just to show you the application of the formula. And I'm going to suggest you do something. In our simple interest formula, it's I equals PRT. And what I really suggest you do is make a note of what each letter is. So P represents the principal. In this case, it's $500. R represents the interest rate. Remember, it's the interest rate as a decimal. And in this case, it's 2%, or 2 divided by 100, and that's where your 0.02 comes from. And in this case right here, T is 1, because it is 1 year. And all we're going to do is we're going to get out our calculator, and we're going to plug this in exactly as we see it. And when we do that, we get $10. So let me quickly do it on our calculator just to show you how easy it is. We're going to go 500 times 0.02, and I know this is ridiculous, but times 1. And there's our $10. So we've calculated the interest, And now our next question is, how much does he have in his savings account after 1 year? So again, we have a little simple formula. Our finish amount is equal to the principal plus our interest. So in this case right here, start off with 500, added $10 interest. We got $510. And there's our final answer. Again, a simple interest formula. We'll do the simple and we'll do the compound and we'll see what the difference is. So in this one right here, we're going to use our simple interest formula. I is equal to PRT. And again, get in the habit of labeling. The amount of money we invest is $4,800. The interest rate is 2.5, which is 0.025. Again, 2.5 divided by 100. And again, you could do that on your calculator if you want. And finally, we are only putting it away for 6 months. T is not 6, T is 0.5. Because remember, our units are years, and there's 12 months in a year. When we plug this into our formula, again, I'm going to not get out the calculator this time. I'm just going to write down the answer. But we put everything into the right spot and we get $60. So in simple interest, we would make $60. Well, let's look at the same story, but again, we are going to have compound interest. Now, there's one little typo here. We're going to compound monthly. So every month, we're going to calculate the interest. But remember, the interest is based on an entire year. And we have to break 2.5 into, well, how much is that per month? So in this case right here, here's going to be our formula. A is equal to this. And as long as we know what each one is, we simply plug it in and we use our calculator. So the principal is $4,800. The interest rate is exactly the same as the one above. N is the number of compounds. Well, we're doing it monthly. There are 12 months in a year. And finally, T is equal to 0.5 again. Because again, remember, the units are years. And what we're simply going to do is we're going to plug everything into the formula in the right place. 1 plus 0.025 divided by 12 times 12 times 0.5. Now, the only thing that you're going to have to do, if you don't have a decent calculator, you're going to have to work inside out. So the first thing you would do is you'd figure out what that equals. And then you would add 1 to it. And you'd figure out what that equals. And then whatever that equals, you'd raise to the power 6. So I'm going to do that all on my calculator. But again, you might not have a very good calculator. So here's what I said. First thing we would do is figure out the fraction. And we get a nasty number. And then we're simply going to add 1. And we're going to get that. So we've taken care of the inside of the bracket. Then we're going to do our exponent. So we're going to push the exponent button right here. And 12 times 0.5 is 6, and we're going to see that that equals, and then finally we're going to multiply that by the 4,800. And we end up with $4,860.31. So we end up with $4,860.31. Now remember, that is the amount of money we have at the very end. So if the finish amount is equal to the start plus the interest, well, the interest is equal to the finish minus the start. And our finish is this, and our start is this. So we end up with $60.31. And I know that doesn't seem very different from the one above, but we're still making more money with our simple interest formula. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is pause the video and try these yourself, and then come back and check your work and fix any mistakes you have. I'm going to write in the answers, but try them yourself first. So make sure you've worked your way through those and you have made any corrections or noted any